Happy holidays, and welcome to another episode of Bright Lights. I'm your host, Lacy Johnson. We're coming to you live from our studio in North Minneapolis. And as always, it's another blessed day in the hood. Uh, just up front, some homework. Go out to lacyjohnson.com, subscribe to our channel, donate to the podcast, support it financially, click the bell and get notifications. We also have an online store that have things like my Bright Lights mug here, which you can't see that very well, and T-shirts and all kinds of good stuff to help us on the mission that we have here to provide encouragement and information to people who are trying to achieve in life and tell them how to get that done. As always, I just let you know I think we can be anything we want to be in life, and I want everybody out there to know that. And we're here not only to say that to you, but to show you how to do it. Once again, the seasons. As you know, this year I have on my kind of notice Christmas colors. It's a green jacket, green and red tie here. It's just in for the season. Now, one thing that's kind of putting a damper on the season is that I had an older brother, half brother, but we say half, but he's really like a whole brother. Passed away yesterday, and so dealing with that. This is the second time in the past couple of months I've had a sibling that passed away. I said a month ago that I really consider myself blessed because it's been 60 years before I've had a sibling pass away, and uh, my faith will see me through this. So I want you to know that. Now, we got a very special treat episode for you. You might not think it's a treat, but I call it flipping the script. Instead of me interviewing a guest, I am going to be the interviewee tonight and find out, Lacy, where did you come from and what motivated you and who's the wind under your wings and things like that. And for that chore uh, of interviewing me, and I figure since we are flipping the script, what better person to interview me than someone who's familiar with scripts? And so I have a past guest, a friend, business associate of mine that I've really talked him into doing this. I might regret it later on because I think he's a tough interviewer. Mr. Frank Torchia of Torch Entertainment. Frank is a movie and TV producer, and like I say, a good friend. And he's one of those. I think he's originally from Long Island, New York. Nice guy. I just like Frank. And I told you before of all the traveling that my wife and I and my family has done. New Yorkers are the friendliest people I've ever met, believe it or not. People find that strange, and I got a lot of great, friendly New York stories to tell you. So, without further ado, because it's not about, well, go out and look at episode 20. You find some more information about this great gentleman. So, without further ado, my interviewer tonight is Mr. Frank Torchia. Welcome to Bright Lights, Frank.
Hey, Lacy, how are you?
I am very well. I think we talked briefly. I know you're preparing that great Italian dinner for Christmas and the seafood and everything. And I know you've been shopping for your kid. And you're recently a proud grandfather. But guess what, Frank? It's not about you tonight.
It's about you.
Yeah.
It's about you. So Lacy Johnson, welcome to Bright Lights. And welcome to the studio. I'm excited to have you here today and flip the script and get everyone to know the Lacy that I've grown to know over the last few years. And so welcome, Lacy Johnson, businessman, entrepreneur, father, husband, grandfather, faithful servant to the Lord. Boy, you got a lot of titles underneath your hat, don't you?
Yes, but their titles, and the most important one I think is just servant, Frank, and I think that's the greatest thing you can be, and I think it's hard to, well, it's impossible to be a great leader without being a great servant. So
That's true.
I take that I take pride in that. Of course, my wonderful wife, my two sons, and the joy of my life, my heart, my young grandson Aiden. So I've been truly blessed.
Fantastic. Well, let's go back to Christmas past,
Okay.
and let's go back to how Lacy grew up with his family and his siblings, um, and so we're going to go on a journey, so to speak. That's how kind of I want to kind of take the audience and the people that maybe just know of you but don't know you. So how you got to where you are today and the foundation that was laid from your parents and your grandparents and how you were brought up that set the tone and to got you to where you are today. So let's talk a little bit about, now I'm an only child, so it's a little bit different what I'm going to ask you because I had no one to blame anything on.
Right,
So
right, right.
how was it growing up with 9 siblings?
Well, the first thing is I think about is just the camaraderie and the love and support. Second thing, especially looking at my grandson, I always had someone to play with. We were competitive, lots of fun, know it all. But once again, having some great parents, and it's just I tell people I had a perfect childhood, and it
Wow.
involved my siblings and my 9 siblings, my mom and dad. I grew up around eight great eight grandparents, and I even knew my great grandfather and my great grandmother. I remember my great grandfather. I tell people he used to call me Joe Lewis. I never figured out why he called me that. But where I grew up, when I was growing up, we in the culture I grew up in, we dare not ask questions of grown-ups and the elders. So I
Yeah,
never
be
did ask
seen and
you
not
why.
heard. Be
Yeah, it's
seen
to
and
be
not
seen and not
heard.
heard.
So let me
And
ask you a question. There was a book called The Birth Order. I don't know
mhm.
if you ever read it or you heard about it. Where are you in the birth order on the 9?
Okay, I'm the middle child and the middle son. And
Okay.
so I guess somewhere along the line, I think people have theorized I've always had a lot of attention. I think too that I had 2 brothers that grew up in the house and 6 sisters. So the 6 sisters was kind of great because they showered a lot of love and attention on you and help you out, and they taught you about how to relate to ladies and females and things like that. So I'm the middle child and middle son.
Awesome. What did Dad do for a living?
My dad was a carpenter, and
Okay.
he basically remodeled homes. Him and my mom both worked for a family that was in the oil businesses, and he took care of the homes and remodeling all the different properties that they had. And my mom was a helper, and she helped take care of raise the children and things like that. And just well, by the way, we ended up being very close. I mean, we all like families. I know down south people have this stereotype of down south that we didn't get along and racist, but we just was one big family, white, black, and it didn't matter, and we had a great time.
Well, so Mom and Dad both worked outside the house?
Yes, until originally, and once again, as time went on, and I guess we got more financially stable and we could afford it. My mom to start taking some time off. As a matter of fact, and you might ask me this later on, but one of my great childhood memories was when my mom got to the point where she was off on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'd come home from I think junior high, high school, and the house would be warm. You could smell food, and I mean that was just a great childhood memory. And my mom was just a hard working, smartest person I ever met in my life.
That's awesome. So were the kids natural? Were you and your siblings were you naturally self-sufficient to kind of care for yourselves, and the olders making sure the youngers did stuff that whether it's chores or homework? How was that kind of
Yeah.
relationship having the siblings kind of while mom and dad's at work coming? Walk us through that.
Well, from day one, the expectation was that we'd be self-sufficient and we'd take care of ourselves. But once again, given 6 sisters, my mom, it was 3 girls, 3 boys, 3 girls, and so during my formative years, each one of the older girls had a younger sibling, a younger boy to take care of, and so my middle older sister took care of me, and so that was kind of nice. You establish those relationships. But as far as self-sufficiency, yeah, that was the expectation from day one, and that's one of the best values that was instilled in me as a child.
So did you all going to, was church and
Oh
faith
yeah.
important growing up in the household?
Yeah, in fact, it was the most important thing. And, a lot of times I know people out there who probably not familiar with church, they think of you as being some type of zealous, but, it gave us a very moral compass on life. It gave us a perspective on life where we didn't think we were the center of the universe and everything is surrounded around us. And I think on a practical level, if you think about it, going to church every Sunday, and the preacher almost always seemed to know what happened in your life the week before. So he would do like a recap of the week before and put that in perspective from a spiritual way, and then he'll give you a message to go forward with the next week. But I think the most important thing about it is that there's nothing in life that not covered by Scripture and the teaching of Jesus. And so when I left home 5 days after high school graduation, I had all those teachings in me, and I was confident that I could tackle anything the world had brought my way, and that has proven to be true. I can't think of anything that I've come across in life that the Scripture had not prepared me for. And I should not just say the Scripture, because behind the Scripture were my mom and dad and my grandparents and my elders and deacons and reverends.
Did everyone live close? How was the family unit between grandparents and aunts and uncles? Were they like, I grew up in an Italian family. Everyone was like within a house or two on where we all lived.
Right.
And so when we all got, we got together for big Christmas dinners and all the Sunday feast at grandma's house. How was that growing up? Were everyone close by to kind of all get together? And how was that growing up with the extended family? Because that was important to me. I wanted to see if how that wasn't how that affected you growing up.
I think that's a very good point. I think the extended family was very important. My grandmother, up until the fourth grade, my grandmother lived across the field, and we could walk there in about 10 or 15 minutes. And then when I got to the fourth grade, we bought a bigger house across the road from my grandmother, and it was just perfect. My dad had 17, 18 sisters and brothers. So
wait, time out. So you're one of 9, and your dad is one of 17 or 18.
18, yes.
18. So, yeah. Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Family reunions and aunts and uncles and a lot of, the seen but not heard, making sure that that community, there was nothing you can do that didn't get back to somebody in the family.
Exactly. Well, and just not family. I grew up in a small town where basically all the adults knew each other. And so anywhere you went, someone knew who you were. And we were talking about this the other day, and I really, really appreciate this. When I grew up, adults stuck together when it came to the children, and they all had the same basic philosophy towards children. So you were always surrounded by the same type of adults who had the same attitude towards you, and who had the freedom at any time to discipline you. And so really it was just, it really boiled down to us kids versus them. But
and it seems like there was a whole lot of them.
There was a lot more of them, and they had a lot more power. And
they were a lot bigger also.
And they were a lot bigger, but the great part about that, they were such great people that you just felt blessed to have them in your life.
There's probably also a lot of love, Lacy.
Yes.
A lot of love with so many aunts, uncles. I'm guessing a whole lot of cousins with all those aunts and uncles that you had as well. Yep. There had been a lot of love, and so that's how I grew up. My mom was one of 8. My dad had a sister, and so I'm an only child, so I had a lot of aunts, uncles, and cousins, and always felt a lot of love from there. And said, "Oh, it must have been hard growing up as an only child." I had cousins that were like my brothers and sisters, so you must have had dozens and dozens and dozens of cousins, and 36 aunts and uncles if they're all married. Boy, and that's just on dad's side. What about mom? How many siblings did mom have?
Well, actually, mom she was, as far as herself, she was my grandmother's only child, but she had step sisters and brothers, about
Okay.
6 or 7, and so basically, on her side, I had 7 aunts and uncles, and given that her father had remarried us, my aunts and uncles, some of them was the same age as I was, and so that was kind of neat also. And we went to school together, and when I had football games and basketball games, I could stay with them. But as far as the extended family, I think that was so important to me. And I feel sorry for kids that don't have that. And yeah, they made a fuss over you, and to be honest, most of the time they save you from your parents discipline you. And I just remember a lot of small things, like my grandmother. Every time we'd visit her, she'd give us a quarter or 50 cents or something. And for a little kid like us, those were all fun memories. But the key thing was the family. And sometimes I think, and I was just discussing this when we were gathered in Houston for my sister's funeral. Sometimes I think the fact that we succeeded and went off to college and we just scattered all over the country. Let me just put it that way. Sometimes, I'm not sure that there was some unintended consequences as a result of that. I mean, and in fact, we might talk about it later. I had a job in Washington, D.C. When my son was born. My oldest ones were born. And one of the reasons I decided to move back to the Twin Cities, because I realized the importance of growing up around your cousins and your aunts and uncles, and I just love to see. And my sister, you should see them. They just make a fuss over my grandkids, my kids, and each other kids and things like that. And I fear that we're missing that. And then once again, I see my grandson, the way he grew up. I took him out to the play park the other day, and I'm sitting there realizing, he doesn't know any of these kids here. And it was kind of sad to me because, I go out the door. In fact, I don't think I've ever been when I was a child around a whole bunch of children. I didn't know who they were. And so I look at it, yeah.
That's got to be challenging, especially today.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much isolation and going on. But we'll get into a little bit about that.
Yep,
so, but I still want to stay backwards before we get to talk about your wonderful grandson and where we are today. So obviously there's a plethora of people that you can pick who has significantly impacted your life. Obviously, mom and dad. But other than mom and dad, who are the most influential people in growing up?
Well, I think the elders in the church, and my grandfather was the head deacon, so he was a very influential. Teachers. I mean, I had the best teachers in the world. I know what a great teacher looks like. And that's when I go into some of these schools now. I'm just disappointed in what I see. I mentioned one elderly guy in particular, friend in particular, about 5 years older than we were. And what I loved about that, and this is part of my blessing as a childhood, he took time with all us younger boys, and he taught us how to do things, and he helped us build toys, and he was just the most patient person I ever known. Dr. Henry Murphy, he's a retired principal down in Mississippi right now. Taught, and I was fortunate that my lifelong best friend was also my neighbor and his nephew. And so he spent a lot of time with us, just giving us directions in life and teaching us how to do things, taught us how to play chess. And to this day, if there's one person besides family that I visit when I go home, is Dr. Henry Murphy, because of the value that he gave to us. And, sometimes when I'm looking at some of the issues that's confronting a lot of these communities, I think about those type of things that shaped me and led to me, whatever success you want to call it. It's just a mentor, just an elderly guy who is just a great mentor for me.
And that's so important today, because a lot of people don't have that.
I know.
You talk about childhood memories, and it sounds, oh my gosh, you have so many childhood memories to pick from. So if you were to pick a childhood memory that you go back to as in a reflection of joy, what would that be?
Well, that's the family ones I talked about when my mom was off on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I came home. But uh, just playing basketball with the guys, working with my dad, painting. I just remember one time, and when I was younger, before I think I started working with my dad when I was about 12, 13 years old, and he was just the greatest gentleman. But before that, I was working in the fields for summer, and just the joy of finally working with my dad and remodeling. I remember one time we had a do a ceiling in his old antebellum home, and there was so many little nuances about it. It took us all day to do the ceiling, and so those are the type of memories that I have, and just my classmates. I mean, the smell of lunch in the schools, just how friendly we all got along and supported each other. I mean, it was an idyllic, a little small town area, and growing up in an environment and a culture where people had morals and ethics. I mean, I didn't know liars growing up. I didn't know thieves growing up. I didn't know murders growing up. I mean, we just all, in fact, the one liar that we did know, he lied for entertainment, and we all knew he was lying. It was a joke. And then, to
Would,
grow
would
up in a,
you would you say that especially today, and the divorce rate again is skyrocketing in every community. I
yeah,
don't care if you're black, you're white, Hispanic. I mean, the divorce rate is at the highest ever. And back when we were young, divorce was not prevalent. There was always a father in the home.
hmm
There was always dad to come home with. You
yep.
know, so how did that? Do you think that had a bigger impact that maybe most people don't understand? Growing up, knowing that your dad was there, he was mom saying, "Wait till your dad gets home," or and but knowing that he loved you and talk a little bit about that because I really believe most people don't understand the value of having the dad at home and what that does to the family unit, not only for the current generation, but for future generations.
Yeah. Well, first of all, a little correction. My mom wasn't the type to say, "Wait till dad get home." That wasn't mom. In fact, my dad might have spanked me once when I was about 5 years old, but my dad never. But mom, that's a
Okay.
whole different story. But yeah, just have. Well, let me put it this way, Frank. Um, I had two parents. I had a support system of uh, older people that I knew that loved me and cared for me and wanted the best for me. I mentioned I had a mentor. I mentioned I had great friends. I mentioned the morals and ethics of the environment that I grew up in. And where I'm getting to, Frank, look, I don't know. I can't imagine what it would be like not to have my dad in the house. And I just strongly believe, and I probably looked this up, that there's a natural instinct in us to want to be around our natural parents. And so I just can't imagine between having your both parents in your house, the support system, the faith part of it,
Tell me
people who
about
have.
that.
Mhm.
I grew up a Catholic. I'm a non-denominational Christian now, and my kids. We went to school. We went to Sunday school on Sunday. Went to church. We went. I had a men's Bible study. It wasn't as prevalent as I went. I'd go to Ash Wednesday. We go to Mass on Sundays. What was it for you growing up, and what was God to you when if you had to reflect on growing up with God in your heart? What would be a word that you would associate with that?
Someone who looked over and after me, and I don't want to get overly dramatic, but I just always felt uh, uh, an angel was walking with me when I was growing up, and that's give you a certain confidence in life. And I grew up around very spiritual people, and I could tell some stories. These are very spiritual people, and you came to have an appreciation for the spiritual world. Even as I was going to school and supposed to be a smart guy and taking trig and physics and chemistry and stuff,
I hated
That
you. I hated guys like you.
and, and so, but here's the thing. Uh, wow. Uh, because I grew up around spiritual elders, that was some things they showed me you wouldn't believe. And
So it sounds like, as we, our lives are pieces of a puzzle,
yep,
and our foundation of as we grow up, the strongest pieces of the puzzle stay with us.
yep,
And it sounds like mom, dad, and God played such a huge role, and which is different what's going on today. There's not a lot of moms and dads that take an active role in their parents. Not saying they don't, but it's not prevalent as it used to be when you and I were growing up.
hmm
And the fact that we put faith in God, and with society today taking God out of everything, it sounds to me like those are elements of your foundation, the building blocks that help Lacy become who Lacy is today. Would that be accurate?
that would be accurate, more than accurate, as a matter of fact. And I was always, I think, kind of blessed where if a life lesson came across me or my heart or whatever, I read something or saw something, I just automatically adopted it. Whether it's build your hope in things eternal and not put your hope in things material, whether how you treat everybody, whether to have faith and confidence that it is better to give than receive, and just know that the blessings that I received as a result of doing that. Thinking about times when it was challenging, even as an adult, it became challenging because you're going to get challenged on your beliefs and your faith. And to be honest, when you're young, I mean, when I got to college, I was there to sow some wild oats and things like that, and
So
and
as
go ahead.
you kind of grew up in the South, when maybe times when it was a little bit more stressful, in especially with some of the divide that was going on back then, not to the degree it is today. But how was that with maybe with all with Martin Luther King and growing up down there? Tell me about how that impacted you and in your community, and then transitioning from the small community to university, and what was that like for you?
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, I I've never done stress in my life. I've never done fear in my life. I've never done worry in my life, and maybe because of some of those type of things. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, and I tell everybody this, and they find it hard to believe, even though I grew up down south, Jim Crow South, during the civil rights era, and then let me put it this way: uh, there were uh, child talk, and there was adult worldly talk, and the child environment that I grew up in was mainly adults teaching me how to be the best person I can be, how to deal with the world and the challenges, and how to just process what was going on. So, on the one hand, I had those close to me, really putting in perspective what I was seeing in the civil rights movement and what was going on as far as the riots and things like that. And I think I've been blessed because, once again, being Christians, they did not exhibit any hate or fear or anything either. And it was just a wonderful, beautiful time. Yes, I mean, once again, it's scriptural. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. And that's how the adults taught me when I was growing up. So I really didn't experience any of that. I just had a great time. I know that, and once again, I grew up in a segregated neighborhood and went to segregated school. But that didn't matter to me. All I knew is that I was surrounded by a lot of smart people, a lot of hardworking people, a lot of great people, and I was happy with where I was. So I never really paid much attention to that. But once again, uh, probably counter to the stereotype, never had any issue with any white person or any racial issue whatsoever. Personally, myself, during the whole time, and I tell people, even growing up down south, to this day, I have not heard the N word come out of a white person's mouth down south. I've heard it in Minnesota. I've heard it in Boston. I've heard it in Rhode Island, and I've got nothing but respect. In fact, I even go even further. I've never even seen a white person disrespect a black person where I grew up at. But now it's Natchez, and if you go do some research on Natchez, Mississippi, it got a unique kind of history, though. So that never bothered me. We were always confident in what we were doing. We always knew we were good at what we did, and to this day, what other people thought, I didn't care what white folks thought or anybody thought. We knew who we were, and
So how was that transition from a small town to University of Minnesota?
well, it was a smooth transition. Actually, I had come up to Minneapolis during the summer after my sophomore year in high school. But you know, it's kind of like cooking and driving, Frank. I always knew I could do that even before I did it, and I always knew that I could adapt to any situation. So I was never intimidated. It's just another, when I came to Minnesota, went to a big city. Even today, anywhere I go, I'm just going somewhere else. And there's nothing intimidated or anything about it. So it was a rather smooth transition. I think it helped that I had family up here, sisters. When I started at University of Minnesota, I had two sisters going there at the time. So it was just a smooth transition. And you have to understand, too, at that age, I'm looking to sail across the horizon to see the world and things like that. And that was all part of that kind of attitude. And I've always been blessed to think I could do anything I wanted to do, and I was just excited about coming here and getting it done.
And what did you major in?
English. I started off in pre med, and I um, I I had a friend of mine. You remember I mentioned these physics and chemistry classes in high school, but I had a classmate who would put novels inside his chemistry book, and we'd be sitting in class, and he'd sit there reading his novels. Long story short, he makes C's in chemistry, but on the standardized test, he scored almost as high as we did. And I'm like, he must be getting something out of those books. And I told myself, whenever I got to college, I was going to force myself to take classes that made me read and English literature classes because he was getting something out of them. And then fast forward ahead, I think my sophomore, junior year, I took a class on John Milton, and I couldn't understand a word he was saying. But the Professor Wright, I think he was the chairman of the English department. He was our instructor, and the best thing he did was made us learn the first 26 lines of Paradise Lost, to memorize them. And in order to memorize them, I had to understand what it was saying. And once I understood what it was saying, I just got blown away by Milton, and that's what probably took the scale. But I had always been interested in English and literature. Well, let me put it this way, Frank. I have always been interested in every subject, and I started out with Edgar Allan Poe and transitioned to some of the poets, Conte Cullens and E. E. Cummings and Keats and people like that. And then I transitioned to Charles Dickens. So I was always interested. I always loved reading. My mom bought a 8-volume encyclopedia, I think, when I was in the 8th grade, and by the 9th grade, I couldn't go to the end of the volumes and find a page I hadn't read. So I always had that thirst for knowledge. And so that's what I eventually transitioned to English, and eventually that got me into tech writing, and eventually that got me into computers and engineering.
Awesome, awesome. And where did you meet your wife?
Uh, I met my wife at a disco called the Fox Trap, and we laugh about that now. She's the fox that trapped me, but
we'll put that on private. We'll just edit that later.
Yeah, I have studio, my tech guy edit that out. But I was always, I never, very seldom went out on Saturday nights, but I'd go out like early Saturday evenings and make sure I make it back home by 7 o'clock because I had some shows I watched. So one evening, I think about 5:30 or 6 o'clock, I walked into this little disco, and they were, before they even got going, and my wife was sitting there, and she was, at the time, she was a model, had a cute little afro and things, and had such a nice disposition about her. And once again, by that time I was in a fraternity, and we have a lot of banquets and things, and I'm like, you know what? She's nice, and she'd be nice to take to banquets, and she just had a great personality. And to be honest, I've always been kind of partial to Southern country girls, and she fitted the bill, and we just got along very well and had a lot of stuff in common. So that's how I met her. Started dating her. Well, I didn't really just started talking to her because I wasn't interested in dating, but some of my friends and frat brothers saw it right away. They said, "Yeah, you're gonna settle down with her." And nah. So here I am, 40 years later, and we're still together and been married for 34 years, and
That's
raised
awesome.
2 sons. Yes.
And so now we're moving along the journey, and we're still a little bit in Christmas past. We're almost to Christmas present
Okay.
as we're doing this little story and
Mhm.
journey. So tell me about the first job you got out of college.
The first real job I got out of college, once again, was tech writing. My senior year at the U, I read about a job opening for a tech writer in Hennepin County information technologist department, and I applied, and you had to take a test. And here's the thing, Frank, I scored the highest on the test of anybody,
Wow.
but I didn't get the job. They gave the job to this white female hiring manager gave the job to 4 white females. Now, I'm like, wait a minute. And you have to understand, and we'll get into this. To me, whatever the obstacle, doesn't matter to me whether it's racism or a car isn't running, I'm out of gas, I don't have any money. And life is like a chess game to me. And I'm like, you know what? I should I should have had one of these jobs. So I ended up suing Hennepin County and winning, and they gave me the job. And I never, one of my things in life is that I don't even hang on to that stuff. It's just, I'm not emotional about stuff. It's just, this is what I got to do to get what I want. And I'm just goal oriented, and I don't personalize anything. So I got there, Hennepin County, and we can get into this later. And I started writing about the sheriff warrant database and computers and things like that. And I've just always been the type of person, if I can read it for myself and understand, I don't want nobody explaining it to me.
Right.
And so that's when I decided to go back to school and take computers and computer programming.
Okay. And so you go from a technical writer, you went to computer programming. What's the next career path that you went to?
Yeah. So the interesting thing, when I finished that Brown Institute in Computer Programming, I had made up my mind I was going to take the summer off. I don't know why. I can't understand it, but but I ran into a fraternity brother at a grocery store, and he said, "Send me a resume." Long story short, ended up becoming a tech writer at Control Data, but I always wanted to be a software engineer, and I was working in test engineering and all. There was only one software engineer in the engineering department. Everybody else mostly electrical, a few mechanicals, and things like that. Long story short, it just so I kept bugging my boss. And Control Data was the greatest company because all you had to do was say I wanted to do something, and people helped you do it. And so I kept bugging my boss about being a software engineer. The software engineer in the department quit, and abruptly, by the way. And my manager, as soon as he quit, my manager came to my desk and threw this big, thick listing on my desk and said, "You want to be a software engineer? Here you go." And I just remember, at Brown, we studied what they call higher level languages, where you just print statement. Long story short, this was an assembly language job where you're dealing with the hardware. You got to know everything that the hardware is doing. And I just remember that first day he gave it to me. At the same time he gave it to me, as a matter of fact, I'm standing there with all these electrical engineers and trying to figure out there's a problem with this program, how we fix it. And I just remember, once again, God sent angels to you. There was a electrical engineer there named Dave Satnan, and I'll mention his name because he has a lot to do with my foray into technology. And I just remember him saying, "Oh, that's the problem is the interrupt trap," and that's what he talked. I didn't have the slightest idea what an interrupt trap was. But here's the thing, and as we talk about it, I think a lot of life is about your perspective, your attitude, and how you react to things. And I knew I didn't know what in the heck was going on there, but what I said to myself, and I just said, and this is honest truth, I said, you know what? For the first 6 months, people are gonna wonder how in the heck did this guy get this job? But I promised myself, I said, I'll put up with that. And in 6 months, I'm going to be the best in the world at this. And so everywhere I went, I took the listing, I read it, and did my research to figure out what I was doing, and that was just my attitude. And that's how I got started in software engineering. And we were building something called the Standard Airborne Computer for the fighter jets, F4s through the F-18. And I was doing that, some of that micro coding and firmware coding. We had something called an 8-place environmental test monitor that I was in charge of, where we put these computers in environmental chambers and we cycle them up and down with the temperatures, we vibrated them and things like that. We wrote, there was a disk operating system that was a part of it. So I just had an opportunity to learn a lot of great stuff, and not just the technology, but these were defense systems. And this is the blessing that I had. The Department of Defense had standards and ways of doing things that took into account all the various problems and issues that they've had in the past and how to avoid them. And so I got a real great training in just development of software, where I was able to, when I moved over to the commercial world, that was a piece of cake. In fact, when we were doing military systems, we considered the commercial world a bunch of hackers, because but I mean, if you think about it, our stuff had to work. I mean, if my stuff didn't work, a fighter jet would crash, or a missile would end up in the wrong place, or a torpedo would end up in the wrong place. We'll get back to the station, and we got the wrong picture, reconnaissance picture. So quality and getting things right, I think having that foundation in engineering really helped.
Awesome. And so at some point you transitioned to say, I want to start my own company.
Yep.
So what was that always in the back of your mind, wanting to, hey, I want to do something for myself? Or did something spark your interest that kind of said, hey, this is what I've been doing, now this is what I want to do?
Well, I think there was a couple of levels to that. First of all, once again, writing the disk operating system and Bill Gates and MS-DOS and Microsoft, I'm like, I want to do it. I want to start my own Microsoft. So that was one thing. And then I guess the second part of that, I've always, and perhaps just intuitively, appreciated the free enterprise system and starting companies and creating wealth in our communities. And I've always looked at that as the best way of going about it in technology companies. So I wanted to, from a personal level, create a technology company, but on another level, and probably more important level, start creating businesses in our communities so we can provide jobs and opportunities and knowledge to the people in the community. And then we might get into this a little later, because it is a risk. But I grew up among men who put their life on the line for me. And I just figured to take a risk in business and financially, that's not like risking your life for. And I just considered go ahead.
I was going to say, so when you made that decision to say, okay, I'm going to leave a nice salary job and benefits and say, oh yeah, I'm gonna live the American dream. I'm gonna start my own company. Hey, honey, I love you, but I'm giving up my salary, and we're gonna go into business for ourselves. How was that conversation like?
Well, I think by that time I had built up a certain amount of confidence and faith on the part of my wife, since I've lost a lot of it since, though. And then I was perhaps too young and gung-ho to really appreciate the risk. And then, at the time I could financially afford it. And so I think from that standpoint, and my wife has always had a pretty good career also. And so she shared my goals and my dreams and was willing to support me in it. And so I think that's what helped, is that she supported me morally, spiritually, financially, and everything else. And that's what made it a lot easier. But it was a risky area. And by the way, at that time, and this is what age does to you, you have to understand that I thought I could do anything I wanted to do. And I had all kinds of opportunities. I didn't realize that as you got older, those opportunities shrink, and things that you thought you had everything under control. Could no one tell you anything? I know I can get this done. And But life, God, or whatever have a way of humbling you, which is good, and providing wisdom to you. So I was too young to understand what I was really getting into, Frank. Is I guess what I'm trying to say. It perhaps my wife was too.
Now, were your boys born at this time
Uh,
when you started your first company, or did come
yeah,
about later?
well, yeah, that's a good one. My oldest son was born. As a matter of fact, I explained earlier that I was out in D.C. for a while, and then they brought me back to Minneapolis Control Data, and I worked there for a while. We were building an air reconnaissance system. They sold us off to another defense contractor. Long story short, there, instead of moving down to Orlando, I had a fraternity brother classmate who had started a small computer company, and I used to just, when I was in corporate world, I just go over in the evening to just help him, just volunteer to help him get some things done. And when it came time for me to go to Orlando, I didn't want to go there. Once again, I wanted my children to grow up around each other. He just offered me to run his company and give me ownership in that. And that was my first
Okay.
small business ownership and first CEO, chairman of the board type of position.
Well, that's exciting news. That had to be offered. That had to be kind of a proud moment for you, and not a culmination, but coming from humble beginnings, hard work, close family, aunts, uncles, and cousins, going to church, going to school, and going from working for someone, and now you're the CEO and president of this company, and the foundation that was laid from all of that kind of helped supported your shoulders, because without that strong foundation, it could have been, I think for me anyway, that, all the businesses that I've started have similar experiences to you. And the first company was pretty successful, and it was exciting. It was also challenging. We talked a little bit about this before. When, hey, I'm getting a salary, but I'm the president and CEO, and everyone's got to get paid before me. And if there's not enough revenue, hey, honey,
Right,
call the
right.
mortgage company, tell them we're going to be late this month. But you bet on yourself.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that was something that it wasn't even, chips are all in. I'm betting on myself. If someone's going to do it, it's going to be me. And
Yeah.
I definitely feel that about you.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I feel. But once again, uh, at that stage in life, just about everything that happened was like, yeah, this is what's supposed to happen. And I've always been pretty even keel. I don't get down and I don't get up. I'm just pretty even keel. And yes, I'm in this thing, but this, just another day at work type of thing. The financial part of it is that now, of course, you got to focus on bringing in the revenues and things like that, and that is difficult. But it was also exciting in the fact that as the head of the company, I'm out in the business community and I'm meeting bankers and factoring companies and things like that, because sometimes we had to do that to finance the deals that we were working on. I'm meeting all kinds of highly skilled technologists, and I guess even more rewarding than that, we were providing jobs for the people in the community. And I just remember, especially at the first company that I was at, we had an administrative assistant, and she was a single mom, and she had our budget down to the penny. And but once again, it was the first time that I just remember some Friday evenings I had a choice, and these are tough choices, but it was an opportunity for personal and professional development. I had a choice of either giving this vendor a story and paying my staff, or paying this vendor, and my administrative assistant wouldn't be able to go home and pay our rent and things like that. So those are but I like tough situation. Just about everything is like chess to me. And I told you about my mentor that taught me how to play chess. He always accused me of playing nip and tuck games where there's a lot of pressure, and one wrong move, the whole thing can fall down. So I was always kind of excited about that. And even I tell people one of the reasons I like software engineering, because one bit being in the wrong place, one bad line of code, and the whole thing will come tumbling down and blow up. And I just like the challenge of being perfect. I like that challenge, and so I just took that attitude into everything I did.
Awesome. Well, tell us what you're doing today.
Well, today I have a opportunity. I'm running an opportunity zone fund.
Well, tell people, not everyone knows what an opportunity zone is.
Yeah,
So I want you to do
yeah.
like a quick Reader's Digest version on an opportunity zone to help everyone understand what it is you do.
Yeah, on a high level, back the 2017 Jobs Act, Jobs and Tax Cut Act created IRS tax designation called Opportunity Zone, where if you have capital gains, instead of writing a check out to the IRS, you can take that money and invest it in a company within disadvantaged territory or community zone that they call an opportunity zone. And what I like about that is that it's for the first time, I think, it brings together under the free enterprise umbrella people with money to these minority and poor communities where you can actually start businesses. I'm people that know me know that I'm a conservative, fiscal conservative. I believe in the free enterprise system. I'm not a big fan of handouts, and not that there's not places for nonprofit. I'm not a big fan of nonprofit. I think what our community needs is technology companies, financial companies, companies competing on the global scale that's bringing wealth and jobs and things into the communities and advise teaching people how to provide for themselves and generationally and creating a certain value of work. Just some of the values that I think we need, and really, to be honest with you, Frank, it's the same values that I grew up with, that we grew up with. And I didn't mention it before, but I grew up I wasn't rich. And we talked about growing up black in the Jim Crow era, but I can honestly say that probably 80 to 90% of my classmates went on to college. They got married and bought homes and created a certain amount of wealth. And so that's what I saw that works. And once again, I tell people, I'm about business development and money and putting money in people's pockets. I'm about quality education. I'm about strong families, and I'm about faith. Now, here's the thing. I know that works. And what I see around, I haven't seen anything else that worked. Let me put it that way. And so that's why I'm out here trying to set an example of what I do. I know that works. I've seen it. I mean, we had in my class alone, I think it was, and I think I remember number 265 student. We had 3 surgeons. These are kids that and that's why it's hard for me to buy into it, and people don't often understand that being black or being poor or anything is an excuse for bad behavior, an excuse for not succeeding, because I know better. And I'm
But
out here.
that leads to my next question about the community service that you do. We talked a little bit about the business and the opportunity zones, and you're now the managing partner on that, and bringing opportunity to the inner cities. But tell me about your impact in the community and the things that are important to you.
Well, first thing you need to know, once again, going back, well, let me say this. There's a poem out there that has the line, one of my favorite lines in a poem, that says, "The child is the father of the man." And I'm just, when I was a child, first of all, we helped each other. And I'm from a culture where people don't say no. And so if they see a need, they roll up their sleeves and they go about getting it done. They don't look for other people to get it done. And where I'm getting to is that I saw a lot of needs in our community, whether it was financially and business wise. That's why I started the company. I work with a lot of young men, gang bangers and things like that. And I saw a need there. So I went I went into prison. I did some working with gangs to help get them off the street and do some things. Faith wise, remember, I've been a member of New Salem Missionary Baptist Church here in Minneapolis for over 34 years. And I tend to, whatever situation I'm in, people tend to want me to contribute. And because I don't want to say no and like to say success, but long story short, there I served on the trustee board, started up a charter school because I just believe, once again, looking at the qualities and characters of the school system that I'm from, I know how to educate our children. And to be honest with you, as an aside, I don't trust educators to do it. And so I rolled up my sleeve and did it myself. Served on the charter school authorization board. Served on the STEM board at one of the local high schools here. My fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi, wasn't really about community service and giving scholarships. So I was very involved in that. And then perhaps, and I could go on a long time with this stuff because I think that's what we're put here for. But just even something as coaching my son's fifth grade baseball team. I just realized, because I talked about fraternities and scholarship. We do these banquets and we raise money, and it took a lot of time and money. And then I had an opportunity to coach my son's fifth grade baseball. I'm like, hey, I can have more effect right here without all the overhead and rigmarole. And to this day, I just really have a lot of faith and confidence in coaches and the impact that they have on these children. So I've just done a lot of stuff along those lines, and probably could go on and on and on. But you
Well,
named,
I think the coaching that you did is unbelievably valuable.
oh yeah,
It instills. It's another adult. It's another adult figure in these young people's lives that has an influence.
yes,
And you become and they talk about social media influences, which is BS. It's ridiculous. But you actually have a personal influence. So you're your own little influencer in this little community of this team of young boys that you're going to instill on. And I remember my coaches growing up. My dad coached me, but then when I got too good, I moved up on the levels. And I remember the coaches, and one is he's 79 years old now, and he's doing some mentoring and some stuff in colleges, and because of my college recruiting thing that I did back in the day, and we're working, and we have a connection 50 years later on memories that we had, and these are bonds that are strong,
yes,
and the bonds that you help create will help strengthen communities. And we need more men like you that step up and do that. Men
Can I
of
say something
faith.
about that though, Frank? Though, where I want us to go to is where we don't need more men like me to do that, where we're not relying on volunteer coaches. And you mentioned influences. My influence was my mom and my dad.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the issue right now. Our kids' influences are other people besides their parents and people who really don't have their best interests at heart. And so,
I call
yeah,
it a vested interest.
right,
When you're the outsider, there's no vested interest.
right,
There are some like you that actually have a vested interest in what you do. Yeah, my dad was my hero and my baseball coach, and he was there till I got really good, and I needed better teachers and more teachers to help develop my skill sets. He was at every single game, football, baseball, wrestling. He was there. It was just on an aside, when my college recruiting business that I ran, I can't tell you how many times that I was at an event and I was the only adult male supporting that child in school.
yeah, yeah. And I tell people, and I'm upfront about it. There's nothing that's going to replace a two-parent family, and we keep trying all these gimmicks, and I don't have anything against them. They have short-term benefits, and they're part of the short-term band-aid solution, like big brothers and big sisters and things. But I think we're kidding ourselves if we think these organizations and government programs or any program going to replace a strong family. But we keep trying, and that's another reason I'm out here too, trying to just let people know. Yeah, it took us decades to basically, what's the word I'm looking for? Split the family up, and however long it take us to put the family back together. We got to take the time to do it and realize that anything else we're trying, whether it has to do with gun violence or whatever, this gun violence is not going to stop. I mean, come on, who are we kidding? Unless the reason without faith and strong parents and things like being the number one influence, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, I was just about to say faith. Taking faith in God at a school, and I think was a big mistake. And the divorce rate is skyrocketing. They just on an aside, I had an assistant working for me, and she was a newlywed for 6 months, and she was getting divorced. And I go, why don't you try sticking out? She goes, oh, I'm young enough. I'll find somebody else. And so it's like they considered marriage as in dating.
Right.
And no, it's but because there's no faith in there, they don't understand that, when two people come together, they become closer to God, and the closer to God they get, the closer they get, as opposed to the not spiritual marriage. Oh, we're just going to get married for the sake of marriage. We think we love each other. And so the impact that you can have on people telling your story.
Right.
Of 34 years of marriage, of being at the same church for 34 years, coaching your son's baseball team.
Right.
And our mutual friend Jack Brewer talks a lot about that, of the fatherlessness in not only in the Black community but in community in general, and the disintegration of family.
Right.
And so you are a testament to all that God's glory of perseverance, of hard work and self-belief, but knowing, whether it's your angel or your mom and dad and your support system that you had, because you always felt loved, and you can't do nothing. There's nothing you can't do, because you've been encouraged to do whatever it is you wanted to do, instead of, I think we need to inspire more people instead of telling people what they can't do. Let's inspire them on telling them what they there's nothing you can't do. And it sounds like that's the message that you heard growing up.
Exactly. And just focusing on being the best person you can be and yourself. And I tell people an interesting thing happens when you're focusing on being the best you can be. You don't have enough time to look around at other people and what they're doing and how the world is. You're just focusing on being the best you can be. But just a little small, you mentioned about taking faith out of school, and that is a good point. But I think even more important than that, and what helped me, I had faith in my home. And it was the home and the family unit that served as the basis of giving me what I needed, and parents that loved me, and everybody and these are just smart people. A lot of them, they weren't very educated, but they're the most wise people I've ever met in my life. And once again, that was my blessing also. So they just made sure that we children stayed on the straight and narrow as much as they could. I mean, we still was kids and we still were teenagers, but they set boundaries and set standards for us. And it was imprinted in us as we went through life.
What would you say your number one obstacle you had to overcome, either personally or in business?
That's a very, very well. I think just my own lack of knowledge, I guess, and wisdom, and just when you're young, discipline. I think when you've been successful at just about everything you've tried in your life, there's a certain confidence and arrogance that'll get you in trouble after a while. And I guess the point I'm trying to make, my biggest obstacle in life has always been me. And I never looked at it any other way, because I felt very early that my success in life was between me and God and nobody else. And so that's why you never hear me complaining about the way the world is and history and past and racism and stuff. I listen to other people when they do it, but I felt at a very early age, and accepted at a very early age, that it's about me doing what I'm supposed to do, and my habits and my goals and my values and what time I got up and things like that. And
well,
how
let me
hard
ask you
I
this.
studied.
You've been married for 34 years.
Mm-hmm.
We were just talking about a high divorce rate. Every marriage has its ups and downs. What would you say is the one thing that you and your wife can impart on someone, either a young couple or a couple maybe's got that 7-year itch and they're struggling? What would you say to them that maybe something that you and your wife did or do or have done to inspire a young couple or the couple that's maybe going through some struggles?
and I have to put it maybe in a couple of sections. First of all, I always had standards when I was dating of things I accepted and things I didn't, and I look for a quality woman. So I guess the first thing is find your quality mate, someone who's just a good person. I think that's number one, and then secondly, I think understand it's a commitment that you make before God, and that you just got to be tough and committed to it. They're all challenging, and I tell everybody, I think what really helped because we're young, and I mean, when you get married, you don't know what you're getting into. You don't even know yourself. I mean, come on, and we change over time. But I think what bound us together was the family, and I always was committed to staying with the mother of my child to raise my children. I think that was one. And then growing up in a culture where people stayed married. I mean, people didn't get divorced where I was from. And once again, that commitment where you just get to a point where you realize that you've gone through just about everything you can go through and you've made it. And you realize that no matter what happened, you're going to see things through. And I think that takes a lot of time. And I guess finally, Frank, just growth as a man. I mean, it's easy. And women, I told you I had 6 sisters, and all the women at school liked me, and everywhere I went. And you can go into that situation with that kind of selfish expectation. But if you got a good stubborn wife like I have, she's not gonna let you get away with that, and she's gonna teach you how to get your satisfaction from.
So let me ask you about,
Family.
because finances play a big role, and you got to get your spiritual house in order, but you also got to get your financial house in order.
Yes.
And coming in, whether you're newlyweds or you're getting married later on in life, and you're bringing the two different places together. Talk a little bit about keeping your financial house in order.
Well, I think the number one thing is just to have a budget. I think with also understand, I think it's helpful. And this is once again getting back to the two-parent family. It's a business unit, and you got two revenue streams coming in, and that kind of see you through things. And so once you get on a budget and you start establishing a good habit, and what I always notice is that no matter what the financial situation you thought you had, if you got a budget, and once you start putting numbers to paper, you see it's not as bad as you thought it was, and you can manage it. And so I think that's it. And I think once again, my wife, she, and I guess in most marriages that I know of, they're the financial manager and they're the savers, and I always allowed her to have, which I knew she was. I never worried about the fact that she had her little secret accounts and things like that, and I knew it was for the family, and when it came to it. So I think those are the type of things, and then have a common, and this is where the support come in at. We a lot of times, instead of going out spending $30,000-$40,000 on a new car, we'd invested in a black business or something, and have the common values and things like that, with the understanding that you're risking it all, and it might create a few moments. So just have, and I guess what it really boils down to is your perspective on money, and understanding that. And I've always felt like, Frank, I've never been, I don't know why, very motivated by a 20,000 square foot home or Rolls Royce, and so I think that happened. I always looked at money as something that you use to support and provide for your family, and also to help other people. So having that common perspective on finances and money.
Well, I have one more question, and then anything else that you think we missed, we can kind of end on that. But I want to talk about communication and communication in marriage, because that, I think that sets the tone for your kids and for business. And so how do you and Betty, do you guys have a weekly check-in or daily check-in where you just get your time? You guys are together to kind of check in and talk about whatever it is. Maybe there's some things that you needed to talk about. How do you guys kind of coordinate that so you guys are always on the same page? So
Well,
kind of tell everyone again. You're the example. 34 years of marriage, successful business person and entrepreneur and father and grandfather. And I think it's important to hear from someone who's been successful at something, so that others can aspire to that. And communication, I think, is lacking a lot in all sorts of relationships, whether it's marriages and friendships, businesses. There's not as much communication as should be. So share a little bit on how you and Betty go through the communication of being husband and wife.
okay, so when I talk to young men who are planning on getting married, I don't set the expectation that we're going to be on the same page. And I think part of the challenge is how do you keep functioning, love each other, and work together when you aren't on the same page. But it does take a lot of communication. I think, especially when you got and you have to set aside time, especially when you have children in the house. But we're empty nesters now for the most part, and so we're constantly communication. And let's face it, it's a challenge. I mean, I got this, I don't know, left brain, right brain, or whatever, and I have a certain communication where I'm a few words and stuff like that, and my wife is she talks and makes sure you get her attention. So just working and just continuing to talk, and I think just being open and honest. And I don't want people to set the expectation. Maybe there are people out there that in a marriage that is. It's always a challenge communicating. I mean, men and women just look at things differently, and a lot of it depends upon your family background. She's from a family of a lot of sisters and things like that, and they have a certain way of communicating, and then just figuring out their communication style. There are some cultures that they talk in questions, and just understanding that, and just being patient and listening. And you're always, I think, whether it's marriage or life or whatever you do, you always have to constantly be circumspect and ask yourself how you can do better in what you're doing. And I guess, Frank, once again, uh, maybe my personality is self-responsibility, self-accountability. If something, I don't care what it is, if something isn't going right, my first question is, what do I need to do to make it better? And once again, I think my wife and I, we're just good two people. We're just two good people, committed to each other, committed to our kids and our grandkids, and everything else is secondary. And we know we got to go through it and work it out. And be honest with you, growing up in a two-parent family and seeing my mom and dad work it out, and see that their number one priority is the family and not necessarily their little personal type things that they have with each other. And also seeing my mom and dad redo their vows after 50 years of marriage, after all
Wow.
the everything they went through. And so you just have a good role model and example. And I think one of the issues why people are not staying married nowadays, that they were not as blessed as I was to grow up in an environment where people stay together and raise their children, regardless of what the heck was going on. And once again, there's a certain maturity that comes to all of us. It should, unless we're fools. There's a certain maturity that comes to all of us as we grow older that you can bring to bear. And once again,
Awesome.
and there's the help that my wife is just a good, beautiful person, and she's aged like fine wine.
So you married up.
Yeah. God bless me. The scripture said, "Man who finds a wife finds a good thing," and so I think that. And but once again, when I talk to young men, I don't try to make sure. I try to make sure I let them know this is not no romantic novel you're getting into. This is work, and it's not about your happiness, and it's about you get your happiness in doing and executing your responsibilities and things like that. And ultimately, what it does, it matures you. And looking back on it, and to be honest, I fought it a lot, but looking back on it, it really makes you a man and round you out. I tell everybody, and I'm not trying to be flippant. Uh, single a single man can't tell me anything. Basically, I mean, it sounds kind of flippant. You can't tell me anything. You really can't. You got to be in a relationship. That's what really makes you a man, and not by how many women you got and how many kids you got with different women. It's just hanging in there and doing the right thing and taking care of your family.
Awesome. Well, it's. I think we're over a little bit of time. You and I always have this
I
issue when
know.
we talk. We always run a little long. So, if there's something that we hadn't touched on or we didn't talk about, if the floor is yours, Lacy, and kind of share something that maybe we hadn't touched on and that you think would be vital for everyone to hear,
Well,
especially going into Christmas.
right. I guess I'll just reiterate two things. There's nothing new under the sun. And the reason some people are successful, in my opinion, some aren't, is we bring a different perspective, we bring a different attitude, and we react differently. And we're just tenacious about what we're doing, and we don't give up. And we don't blame other people for our situation. We don't blame history. We look at ourselves, and the way I put it, we need to spend more time looking in the mirror, because I can honestly say that at this point in my life, any issues that I had that was long term and negative, it's because of something I didn't do. And I think if we all took that responsibility, it would help. The other thing is that just the solutions. I'm about helping people and changing our communities. And I'm not about band aid type quick fixes. I think ultimately that in these communities, that like the one I live in, that we're going to have to start our own businesses and create our own wealth and generational wealth. I think we're going to have to start making sure we have quality education in these communities. Well, when our children graduate from high school, they're reading at high school level, they're comprehending at high school level, and reading in math and science, and that they value education to the point that they go on to post secondary, and they look at that as a key to providing for themselves and their family. I think we need to really, really understand from a societal, cultural level that the family is the basic building block of any society. And I hope I'm wrong, but all these issues we're seeing, we're throwing money at and coming up with these programs, they would never, ever, ever replace a two-parent family, whether you love and provide protection and support for our children. In fact, if I had to say anything, is that I think we've gotten to the point as adults. There's no such a thing as youth problem. It's just adults that's the issue. We're not doing our job. So it's just focus on family and doing our jobs and raising our children well. And then just finally just living a life of faith, something you can fall back on, a moral compass, something that takes the uh, focus off of yourself and you being the center of the universe, and understand that there's something bigger and better out there. And there is such things like karma and things like that. You kind of reap what you sow. And I think those are the things that I would leave our audience with. And just keep going and never give up. And finally, when you get to my stage in life, you think about the parable of the talents and what kind of return on the investment you want to give God for what He's done for you and what He's provided for you and everything, and how blessed your life has been. And so that's what I would lead the audience with, and the fact that anyone out there, and I guarantee this, you can be anything you want to be in life. I don't care what. Don't let it. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this, Frank, is because especially our young people, it just bothers me that all day, every day, they listen to how unfair the world is and how racist the country is and how slavery is so unfair. And I'll just leave it with this, and this is where good parenting come in. My dad told two things, and this is why I was working with my dad. I talk about how unfair things is. My dad says, "Son, fair is a place where they raise pig. I don't want to hear about that." And then I do remember talking about, because back in those days, once again, the civil rights movement, there was this pet phrase that black people had to work twice as hard as white people and all that stuff. And my dad, he just put that in perspective to me. Also, he said, "Son, look, work is good, and so what you're telling me, they're making you do something that's good twice as much as they do. What are you complaining about?" And so that's the kind of attitude that I've taken on in life, and I always take. I always be positive, and I always hold myself accountable uh, for for what happens to me, my family, and my loved ones. So
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us on Bright Lights today, Lacy. You are an inspiration for many, and you are definitely a blessed man, and I'm a blessed man to call you friend. And thank you for spending about 90 minutes with us and sharing with the audience the Lacy Johnson story. I know you have inspired many.
Thank you, Frank, and you have done so also. And so let's end this mutual admiration club, and we'll do it again. In fact, I might want to make a tradition. Hope to see you soon, and let's work on some. We're already working on some things. So thank you, Frank. Merry Christmas to you and your family. I'm kind of jealous with the Italian buffet and the seafood. And
I'll send you all the videos and all the pictures.
yeah, tease me with it. Okay, thanks, Frank.
All right, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.